Alright guys, today we're going to take a look at the Firefly, and more specifically, cosmetic application of the Firefly. I'm sure there are mod guides out there to get decent performance out of your Firefly, but I've never had any luck, so we're going to move on with other more constructive things. So, as far as integrating a Firefly, I mean, people have been doing it for a long time as Striflies and what I've seen on Alpha Troopers, Raiders, and stuff like that. People have been putting them on blasters for a long time. But one of the things that bothered me, and I covered this in I believe it's the Warlord video, that the Firefly is rather tall. It's rather tall and kind of skinny. And most of the, at least like the Elite blasters in Strike and Elite, are a little more slim, and it always threw me off when you'd see, a Firefly integrated onto something where it makes the Firefly look just huge compared to the other, the primary blaster. And like I said, I mentioned that in the Warlord video, but this is how I went about it. For starters, anytime you do the stock integration, you're going to take and you're probably going to cut off, bottom of the grip, and rough initial cuts. You'll probably come in here. This piece here I've seen used in the past, and I actually used this part the first time I integrated the Warlord. But when I busted it all up and revamped it, I eliminated it. And generally, you come in, cut there, and probably cut this guy out. So you eliminate that much of it, and you have kind of this area left over. I mean, obviously you want the thumb hole, you want the stock, stuff like that. One of the main aesthetic things that is overall the Firefly, I really like its lines. It's got, kind of contoured panels with kind of looks like rivets and seams and stuff like that. It's really pretty cool. I really like it, but I don't know what the heck this is. It's got like fake hoses and tubes and fittings, and I don't know what these little kind of fin things are. And I mean, I can kind of forgive this back detail back here, but it's like, it's kind of like its own thing. Nothing else really in the same time frame had this goofy stuff, and honestly, I just couldn't stand it. So, as far as pulling the proportions of the Firefly down, it's convenient because you can eliminate that. And for starters, you to bring the height down, I think it was with the Hellhound, I think with both, I came along and cut along here and basically eliminated, cut across here and just take that all out. Just cut, well, hate to say that. At least cut out the goofy stuff. That's what I've done in the past. Don't go eliminating everything until you start to shape it to the blaster. But in order to bring the stock, like the actual stock part, down, you can cut basically here. You cut that, and then you can cut this guy off. And this removes basically the actual stock part from the rest of the blaster. Then what you can do is, in order to reuse the ammo holders, you can remove more material, either up here or a little bit down here, in order to, whether you want the ammo holders up higher or lower in your eventual placement of everything. Because you want to maintain this line here, the relationship of things here, and you want to keep the relationship of things here. So basically you take this, and you just kind of bring it down a little bit. And then on the, I can't remember which one it was, on the Hellhound, I believe I drew the line here straight across, and that way I had a good straight reference to go off of. And then depending on how much material you want to remove depends on what blaster you're integrating it to. And so I think on the Hellhound is about an inch and a half, and I there again just picked another line, came across here, and make that cut. That way you have, this piece is kind of independent. You've removed the kind of shroud hood thing, and that's up to you if you want to reuse that. I kind of like it, and it's kind of cool, but a lot of people don't, so that's okay too. Another problem is it's rather a long stock as far as like overall. And I like to pull it in just a little bit because you have a pretty good sized thumb hole here, and you can sacrifice some of that. And you have this nice little seam, like panel line here, that you can cut off there. That maintains the integrity of this body line here. And then you can shorten up this guy if you need and pull it a little closer. That allows you to remove more material here, and you can kind of basically pull it in. And this is where the fitting process on an integration really starts coming in, as far as, you know, you can kind of keep the pieces together. You can kind of tack it with hot glue, and then you can hold it up, you know, on your shoulder and see if, especially like what I've done, you know, quite often is have some kind of underbarreled blaster up front. So you want to be able to have, you know, I don't want to have a giant stock and then have to reach way out to activate my front blaster. So I try to keep the stock tucked in a little bit to where it's still comfortable, but it's a little more cozy, just in order to, you know, keep the blaster overall from being way too long. If you're just doing it for cosmetics, then of course that's up to your discretion. But that's what I've done in the past. So I can actually kind of show you, this is what the Firefly looks like as it's supposed to be, but here's a Firefly that I'd cut apart for another project and then abandoned that and ended up using something else. But you can see the project I was working on had a vagabond up front, and so instead of having 8 dart holders, I decided to mimic the vagabond, or accent the vagabond, by shortening up the length this way and pulling it in and just using obviously 6. So this kind of trims it both height and length, but this gives you kind of an idea of what I had going on. And like I said, like when I did the Hellhound, I ended up cutting a line across here as well, cutting it in half, and I believe I cut, I can't remember, I think I made another cut because on the, yeah, cut the top, cut a section out, and then move the top back a little bit, top half of this, in order to just change the shape of the thumb hole link, or whatever you want to call it, to just complement the aesthetics of the blaster better. So basically, the blaster originally looked something like that. You know, there it is like that, and then once you remove all the excess space, then it really proportions in very well. And this is not finalized. Like I said, I just did some of the initial cuts, and it just wasn't grabbing me like I wanted it to. So like, for example, you could pull this back into here, and that just brings it right, just nice, neat, and tidy. And you still have the shape and the, I guess, personality of the blaster. You still have the full stock. Still have dart holders and stuff like that, but it just brings it in and just kind of consolidates all the nice details, all the nice aesthetics I like about it. But it makes it a lot more, like I said, condensed and a lot more proportional. So I'll bring the back half of a strife here off of another project that I'm working on, not related at all. And let's say, okay, we want this thing, normally this little area here, I like to have kind of match up the same line width, kind of like that, so it's a little more subtle. But for these purposes, we'll just stick right there. And there again, it depends on how you want the blaster to fit, how you want the blaster to look, depending on what you're integrating. This was originally cut to go on the back of a demolisher, and a demolisher is going to fit different than a strife, and so on and whatnot. So I'm going to rough this guy in a little bit. And what you have is still a bit bulbous. I mean, it's still rather large for a strife. I'm not sure I'd ever integrate a Firefly onto a strife and leave it. Even though that's technically what the Hellhound is, only without the long shot and everything else up front. But as far as just leaving it like this, it just doesn't do much for me. There again, you could probably pull it down even more, lower this down, and have this kind of come across and, you know, integrate something else. I think this piece is a bit big for a strife. Like I said, that's up to your discretion. But I do think it's infinitely better than just taking the Firefly itself and sticking a stripe to it, because that looks more like a stripe stuck to a Firefly This here is more of a Firefly on a strife, but that's, like I said, that's my opinion based on what I like to see, so, you know, take that for what it is. If you're doing this at home, it's obviously your blaster, you have a vision in mind, and more power to you. But these are the basic idea, I guess. And it's a lot of work, especially when you start to actually start fitting things together, because you have so many different pieces flopping around and trying to make sure everything's aligned this way and you know, horizontally, vertically, and, you know, all three axes. But once it's all done, I think it's worth it, personally. But other issues you may have, for one thing, once you eliminate the priming slide on the Firefly, you have an awkward space to fill, so that's up to you. Also, when you pull this area down, you end up with a void. Let's see if I can show that off. At the bottom, you have basically this hole that used to be, you know, here. Now you have a void, especially when you have both halves together. And you pull this up to here, you have a hole in the bottom. And what I've done is basically just take a piece of scrap and, you know, glue it in this way, and then just use this take a straight line here all the way down and just file it off, and then basically you do that on both sides, sandwich it together, and you have a filled panel. And you do your body work right, and you won't even see it. But yeah, that's, like I said, that's the basic principles of the idea. How much you remove and where you remove it is up to the actual integration situation. But at least, because I've been asked several times, you know, how the heck did you do that, and what all's involved? Well, here it is. It's relatively simple as long as you basically make those same initial cuts. Like I said, here, cut this guy off wherever, you know, if you want to shorten it up, or if you need to change the angle of this guy a little bit, and then get rid of this unless that turns your crank, then we're just going to have to agree to disagree on that. But yeah, so there you go. If there's any more questions about how, or, you know, any of the particulars, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll answer it to the best of my ability. And until next time, wishing blue skies and green lights to you and yours, and may all your troubles be teeny weeny ones.